So how do private interest foundations actually work? Well, imagine if you had a corporation and a trust and they got together and they had a baby. That's a private interest foundation. So on the one side, like a corporation, a private interest foundation has legal personality. It is an actual corporate body, unlike a trust that is essentially an agreement or a contract. So that's number one. It has a more robust nature to it because it is an actual legal entity like a corporation. But at the same time, a foundation can serve the same purpose that a trust can serve, meaning that it can be established for the preservation of wealth and for estate planning. So what do you need to exactly establish a private interest foundation? So number one, you need a founder. A founder would be more or less the equivalent of the settlor. This is the person, which can be a corporation, an LLC, or an individual, who transfers assets from their own personal asset pool to the asset pool of the foundation. Again, very similar to the settlor of a trust. Number two, you have a foundational council, which is more or less the equivalent of a corporation's board of directors or like the trustee of a trust. This is the, let's call it the entity within the entity that is in charge of making all investment decisions and essentially governing the private interest foundations. Again, very much akin to the board of directors of a corporation. And number three, you need a beneficiary or beneficiaries. Just like in a trust, a private interest foundation manages assets for the benefit of beneficiaries. Now, up until now, you see that this is very, very similar to a trust, but again, with the more robust nature of having its own legal body, its own legal personality. So what can we continue to say about this? Well, what the beauty of this is that just like when a founder of a startup, for example, starts his own company and he has the right to serve in the board of directors of his own company, the same thing happens with a private interest foundation. If you are the founder of a private interest foundation, PIF, you have the right to sit in the foundational council. And unlike the case of the trust, where being the trustee of your own trust can lead to several issues. In the case of the US, it could lead to the trust being categorized as a grantor trust, which means that you're not going to really get many tax benefits out of that if you're the settlor of the trust and so forth. In the case of the private interest foundation, it's much more clear cut. You do have the right to participate in the foundational council if you want to. Again, very much more similar to what you find in a corporation, where the person who is a shareholder of a corporation can also sit on the board. In addition to that, I will say that because private interest foundations are a tool that exists in civil law jurisdictions, they are often found in jurisdictions that are less litigious than common law jurisdictions. If you look at the global map, you look at places like the US, like the UK, like Canada, places that have a more litigious culture, they tend to be common law jurisdictions. Whereas private interest foundations, the two main major jurisdictions where you find them are Liechtenstein and Panama, which are civil law jurisdictions. In both cases, litigation is discouraged, arbitration is favored, and you don't have the same risk of litigation that you find in common law countries, which again enhances the asset protection, because you can have some very strong jurisdictions that apply the common law system, that have good asset protection laws on the books, but ultimately their legal systems allow for more, let's say, frivolous lawsuits to take place, whereas in the civil law system, things are much more limited in that regard. I would also say that what I like about civil law jurisdictions where you find private interest foundations is that judges have much less liberty to create law. Judges in the civil law system interpret existing laws, essentially civil codes, for example, but they don't come in and they don't try to create laws, or their ability to create laws is much more limited than in the common law system, which again makes for a judicial system that is potentially less politicized and also less creative when it comes to piercing asset protection structures. So, what can you do with a private interest foundation? Well, a private interest foundation can hold a stock portfolio, it can hold intellectual property. A private interest foundation can also serve as the holding entity for underlying corporations that can then hold investments or perform active trades or businesses. So all of that is definitely possible. Again, you can use it for estate planning. So definitely 100% possible. And you can really leverage this as a global entity. For example, a Liechtenstein foundation can bank in Switzerland. A Panamanian private interest foundation can bank in Panama and all over the world. So it is great for asset protection. It is great for wealth and estate planning, and it is great as an alternative to trust. So if you want to continue learning about private interest foundations and how they can potentially serve you as a great alternative to trust and provide even more robust asset protection than what you could have ever imagined, then drop a comment down below, like this video, follow us on Instagram, and hey, the Tax Terminator will be back in the next video.